and I'm the Senior Research Manager at DARE-RC, and I will be your moderator today. The FCTO-funded DARE-RC program is an educational research program, and it is being implemented by Oxford Palace Policy Management in partnership with Aga Khan University, Institute for Educational Development, and Sightsavers. It is dedicated to enhancing Pakistan's education system through high-quality research and promoting evidence-based policymaking. We are joined today by two exceptional researchers from Sightsavers. Before I introduce them, I'll just share a few protocol rules. You may share your comments on the content of the webinar respectfully in the chat box. Our presenters will present their content, and then towards the end, we'll have a segment on Q&A. Also, there is a QR code displayed on all slides that will take you to a feedback form, and it will be nice to get your feedback on the content of the webinar. So let's begin. Good morning, Dr. Julia. Dr. Julia is joining us from UK, and let me just see, has she? Yes, good morning, Dr. Julia. So Dr. Julia serves as the head of Portfolio for Health and Disability Research at Sightsavers, leading the organization's portfolio of inclusive education research. With 15 years of experience in applied policy relevant public health and education research. Thank you so much for joining us today. We also have with us Mr. Ittifaq Khan. Good afternoon, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today. Mr. Khan is a seasoned inclusive education specialist with 15 years of experience in the development sector. He serves as a global technical lead for inclusive education at Sightsavers. So let's begin with the content. And I think what I did not do, sorry for that, was to share the profiles of these two esteemed speakers. So here they are. Yes. All right, so we will begin now. Mr. Ittifaq, I'll prompt a question for you first. So globally, what are some of the challenges in assessing how many children with disabilities are attending school? So I'll pose this question for you, and you may respond.
Thank you very much, Sahar. Thank you very much to DARE-RC. For providing this opportunity to us to present some useful and exciting insights from the work we have recently accomplished. Let me start with acknowledging the support from DARE-RC as well as from Pakistan Institute of Education, because we accomplished this study with the support of and in partnership with Pakistan Institute of Education. So let me acknowledge their support. And then coming back to your question, I think it's really important question to start with, because it will be helpful in setting some context in the scene for for the presentation and discussion. Research indicates and we acknowledge that children with disabilities globally are more likely to to experience the educational exclusion, as well as their learning outcome remains poor as compared to their peers without disabilities. Research also indicates that there are 250 million plus children out of school globally, and there are around 140 million children with disabilities within that group. So that actually makes it really complicated, because 49% of children with disabilities, as per research data from Global Partnership for Education and UNICEF, indicates that 49%, so around one half of children with disabilities cannot attend school, are more likely to never attend school in their life as compared to their peer without disability. So this is the complexity that is there globally. However, it's really difficult to know that who these children with disabilities are, where they live, and what kind of disabilities they do have. I mean, identification of these children is a challenge. And then there is another bit that it's really difficult to identify that how many of them and who are those who are already there in education system, be it private or public sector. So, this makes it more complicated, but this is because we don't have globally, there are no standardized practical approaches for the collection of disability data, particularly, data on children with disabilities in low and middle income countries. So that's basically the challenge. Can we go to the next slide, please? So to address this, from 2006 to 2024, several tools are developed by different organizations on collection of disability data. So for example, Washington Group short set is there, developed by the Washington Group on Disability Statistics. There is Child Functioning Module, the same organization developed with the support of UNICEF. There is Child Functioning Module teacher version. And these tools are now widely, used globally for the collection of data. But I think, our discussion and focus will remain on Washington Group short set, because this is a tool which is a standardized tool for collection of disability data globally, but it's primarily used in population census and large scale surveys to find the prevalence of disabilities in general population. It actually assesses the level of difficulties in functioning domains on 4-point scales, from starting from no difficulty to cannot do at all, covering 6 domains of functioning, including seeing, hearing, walking and climbing, remembering and concentrating, and self-care and communication. It is widely, used for the population and people 5 years plus age, but is known for underestimating the disability, because when we collect the data on children with disabilities, it's typically, the data or questions are answered by the parents and caregivers, and that's why it is known for underestimating the disability. So summing up, I mean, it's quite challenging. There are work which is going on to address this challenge, but we still don't know and don't have quite a standardized approach and data on children with disabilities globally. And I'll stop here.
Sides, Mr. Deepak. So how do these particular challenges that you mentioned apply in the context of Pakistan?
Sorry, am I audible?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so again, a very important question. So Pakistan is not different. We are part of the, part of the same boat. In fact, rather more kind of complex context is there that we have because of this scale and size of the educational system in Pakistan. So research and data in Pakistan, we do have 150 and if we include private sector, it goes around 300,000 plus, which are catering, educational needs of over 24 million people. And again, if we include private sector, it goes up to 58 million. So, you can imagine the size of the education system in the country. Children with disabilities are known to face exclusion, extreme exclusion from the education system in Pakistan. There is some work which is already done outside the education system on collecting disability data of people with disabilities, but there is no kind of specific, data set is available on children with disabilities. When it comes to in school, there are multiple reasons for the exclusion of children with disabilities from education, ranging from, stigma and discrimination, lack of, accessible infrastructures of schools and inaccessible curriculum, teachers' capacities, and there are some more challenges that complicates the situation. And that is why children with disabilities remain out of the education system. There is no standardized approach to estimates of prevalence of childhood disability is variable, and there is an urgent need for an accurate kind of data on disability, particularly around children with disabilities within education system and outside of education system. So, until very recently, before, 2023-24, since Pakistan have a devolved system and education is a provincial subject and there are variations and diversity. So until 2023-2024, provinces were using kind of different distinct approaches for collection of data on children with disabilities in education system. But, there are some good positive developments. I think can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so there are some good developments. Government of Pakistan is quite committed to the strengthening of education data system, including data on children with disabilities, which is really a good sign because they have demonstrated that commitment with the approval of a data standardization framework that actually, aims at having a standardized kind of approach and tools for collection of data, educational data in all provinces, including data on children with disabilities. And for that, they have included Washington Group short set in the data standardization framework with a small variation that it actually, caters 6 functioning domains of functioning, but the data standardization framework included only 4 out of those 6 domains. But there is some progress that we are able to at least, include and integrate these tools into data standardization framework. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, I would definitely. We are moving towards the objectives of the research study that you conducted in the DARE-RC. So yes, please share those with us as well.
Yes. So to address these challenges, since data standardization framework, including Washington Group short set of question, is implemented for the first time in Pakistan in 2023-2024. So this is quite a crucial time to explore and assess that how that exercise actually went, how provinces have internalized and taken that change and initiative, and how they have collected the data on children with disabilities as part of annual school census. And that is why, with the support of DARE-RC, we have planned and implemented this subject, this exercise, and the objectives of this of the research are actually primarily to explore the nature and quality of disability data that is collected as part of ASC, and how that data was collected, what were the processes that were used, how it was planned, and how these plans were executed in the field, and how the implementation of these processes actually shape the disability data. So this is an overall kind of objective of the study. And then specifically we actually try to understand the variations of the data between the provinces and causes and reasons of those variation. We also tried to document the experiences of stakeholders, particularly teachers, which were on ground and reported that data to find to have some findings and then recommend to the government of Pakistan, to Pakistan Institute of Education, for making improvement for annual school census data collection in future. Yeah, I'll stop here.
Thank you so much for sharing the research objectives with us, Siddharth. Dr. Julia, so the study that was conducted in DARE-RC used a mixed method design. How did that help in understanding both the quantitative data and the ground realities? I'll just hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for the question, Dr. Sahar. So absolutely, we adopted a sequential mixed method design that we felt was going to be really important, firstly in helping us understand exactly what the data that had been collected through the annual school census looked like, what levels of children with different types of difficulties were being reported, and where and by which schools, and then also beginning to understand the reasons for these patterns and the way that the data, the quantitative data itself looked, which we were able to explore through qualitative work. So the components of the study included firstly a documentary review of all the annual school census materials relating to the Washington Group questions, for example, the different forms, guidance documentation that had been prepared, and reports prepared by the provinces on the basis of the data collected. Secondly, we worked with Pakistan Institute of Education to look at the data that was collected through the annual school census and to run some additional quantitative analysis on that data to understand prevalence of children with difficulties and to understand patterns and distributions and relationships in the data. We used that data as well to inform selection of a small number of schools, 2 in each province. 4 in each province, 2 schools which had reported high numbers of children with difficulties, and 2 schools in each province which had not reported any children with difficulties. We then visited those schools and conducted focus group discussions and interviews with head teachers and teachers to understand their experiences in generating that data and the extent to which they felt the data reflected the realities of their school. And we also conducted interviews with stakeholders, both at federal and at provincial levels, to really understand the details of implementation of these questions and factors that could have shaped outcomes. We analyzed our data quantitatively in Excel and Stata. Qualitatively, we used thematic analysis, and we triangulated findings between the different data elements to really deepen our understanding of what we were seeing. Thanks.
Thank you so much for those details, Dr. Julia. Sounds very interesting. So I have 2 questions. First of all, what was particularly striking as you began work with the data for this study? And secondly, can you shed light on how did education officials and teachers respond to the inclusion of disability-related items in national data tools?
Sure, if you could. Great. So I think the first thing that really struck us is something that Itfaq has already commented on, which is really the scale of the undertaking. It's a really enormous undertaking to collect data from the number of schools that are operating in Pakistan's public education sector across the country, and from data covering the number of children that are attending those schools. To our knowledge, it's the largest scale use of the Washington Group short set questions in an education system globally. So the mere fact that this was achieved is really remarkable and commendable. I think the other thing closely related to this is just the extent to which the integration of these questions within the data standardization framework really demonstrated enormously strong commitment to collecting disability data in the country's education system. And that itself demonstrates real commitment to strengthening inclusive education, because obviously having that data and information about the presence of children with disabilities is really a cornerstone for being able to meet the needs of those children. I think in terms of the response from the people we spoke to, which included stakeholders at federal level, in the provincial departments, and also the teachers and head teachers at school, there was really broadly positive feedback about the undertaking to include these questions in the annual school census, and appreciation for the importance of the availability of disability data and appreciation for the progress towards having comparable standardized data for all provinces. A number of teachers in the different provinces commented on how useful it was for this data to start being collected systematically, and the fact that it enabled teachers and schools and authorities to understand how many children with particular types of challenges were present in different classes in different schools. I've added a quote here on the slide from a teacher in Balochistan who told us previously we only knew if a child was disabled, but now we have more detailed data on the type of disability. This helps us identify specific needs and provide better support for disabled students. And this was quite a widespread sentiment across all the different people we spoke to. That said, there was a little bit of concern among teachers in some of the schools, certainly not all the schools, but in some schools, about whether including children with disabilities in mainstream education and an inclusive education approach was the ideal solution. Teachers raised concerns relating to their workload and relating to limited resource availability to meet the needs of these children. And some teachers questioned whether a special education approach wouldn't be better for the children and also for the schools. So there was a little bit of a mixed sentiment about inclusion of children with disabilities, but broad support for strengthening data and understanding of children with disabilities in the education system.
Thank you so much for that detailed explanation, Dr. Julia. So could you share what were some enabling factors and what were the barriers in integrating the Washington Group questions into the annual school census? And I'll just change the slide.
Sure, thank you. So definitely one of the enabling factors was what I've already mentioned, the broadly positive attitudes, and particularly the level of engagement from provincial departments and their willingness and commitment to including these questions in their annual school census implementation, despite a range of challenges and pressures that they experience. In terms of barriers, the strongest clear barriers we identified related to challenges in terms of both timing and capacity, both of which were quite closely related. What we learned was that the integration of the Washington Group short set questions into the ASC took place under considerable time pressure. In fact, as training and guidance around integration of these questions was provided to provinces, many of them had already finalized their training for the annual school census 23-24 already. And in the case of Balochistan, data collection itself had already started, meaning it was a lot of work for provinces to do to integrate these questions fully into the census at a fairly late stage, often with some additional financial pressures on them as well. But the positive and willing attitudes from the provincial side did make this feasible. The time pressures led to and intersected with capacity challenges, in that time pressures meant it wasn't possible to build as much technical capacity at the provincial level as well as at district and school level around the questions as would have been ideal. It also meant that given the complexity of the questions, there were some challenges experienced with integrating them into the existing annual school census forms and into province's data management systems. What happened as a result of that was that there were some challenges with the provincial forms that were developed. In terms of the forms that we reviewed, there were variations to the standardized wording. As Itvak mentioned, these questions are standardized, and the wording needs to be respected quite specifically to ensure that results are reliable. And there were some variations in the wording. There was some inappropriate use of screening questions. For example, asking, does any child in the school have a seeing disability, and which is not recommended and is known to reduce the numbers that are reported, and then some challenges with missing response options. Additionally, what we saw was that although guidance materials for teachers and schools had been developed to some extent, this was quite limited, and there was very, very little cascading of training and guidance below the level of district authorities. Next slide, please. I've just put in a quick snapshot, I hope you can see it clearly enough, of one of the forms that was used in the annual school census covering the Washington group questions, just to highlight both some of the challenges. For example, you can see here they're asking, is there any student enrolled in school with seeing difficulty even when wearing glasses? Yes or no. So while they've respected the wording of the question quite precisely, the use of that screening question does tend to act as a disincentive to reporting. However, you can see that the school that's completed this form has reported children, but you can also see the number of different cells that they needed to complete in doing this. So it is quite a big addition to the annual school census form in terms of just the amount of information required, and it's also fairly complex in terms of data structure for integration into the existing data systems and processes at the provincial level. Next slide, please. Following on from these constraints in terms of time and capacity, we found that there had been very limited engagement with both schools and teachers specifically. Training and guidance had not been reliably cascaded below the district level. A few head teachers had received training, but no teachers had received external training. And I think 2 schools' head teachers had independently cascaded the training they'd received. 2 teachers, 1 head teacher had actually searched online for information about these questions and used materials that they'd found that way to train the teachers in their own school. But generally, very little information had reached teachers, and the information that had reached teachers was quite inconsistent and coming from different sources. And the end result was that each school more or less developed their own approach to how they answered these questions and generated the data that was collected with considerable variations. A teacher here from KPK explains, we weren't trained, so we didn't know how deeply we needed to assess. If children could read and listen, we assumed they were fine and always reported as no disabilities. Another important feature that came through in our data was that teachers and head teachers had no real information about why these questions had been introduced and why they were being asked to collect this information, or how the information they were generating might be used in future. And this really contributed to disengagement. A teacher instance said, no, I didn't think they had any particular purpose. I assumed it was just a formality, something to complete and submit. the person who delivered the form didn't seem serious about it either. So there was quite a level of disengagement in terms of those questions among many of the teachers and schools we spoke to.
Thank you so much for those details, Dr. Julia. So there were challenges, obviously, and what do you suppose, how did these challenges, what implications do they have for the type of data that was eventually collected?
Great, thank you. So what we saw when we looked at the data quantitatively, so this is based on the actual annual school census data submitted by schools. We worked with all of the data from the 4 provinces and from Islamabad together with PI. We found that there was a very low prevalence of functional difficulty in the ASC data across all provinces. When we speak about functional difficulty, it means children where teachers have said that the child has a lot of difficulty, so either in seeing, hearing, walking, or in remembering and concentrating, or the child isn't able to do that function at all. So the numbers we saw were very low. When we looked at the qualitative data as well, when we looked at the qualitative data, we visited 8 schools which had reported no children with any functional difficulties. In 3 of those schools, teachers told us during focus groups that, in fact, there were children with at least moderate difficulties present at the school, but they decided not to include them when completing the Washington group questions in the ASC for various reasons. So this really suggests underreporting in the ASC data, and our comparison of the quantitative ASC data to other data sources does suggest also that the figures are lower than is likely to be realistic. We also saw a lot of variation across different schools, with most schools reporting no children with any difficulties or disabilities at all, but a small number of schools reporting quite high prevalence. This suggests really and consistently with the qualitative data that many schools didn't engage very deeply with the questions, simply reporting no children at all, and that the schools that did engage maybe used quite different approaches in how they assessed the number of children with difficulties. We looked at a range of relationships between reported prevalence and child-level attributes such as child sex and school size, school level, urban, rural location, but there weren't really any particularly clear substantial relationships. Next slide, please. And this slide is really just to share a few of the numbers. So in the data that's currently available, showing on the screen here, you can see the prevalence of functional difficulty. So a lot of difficulty or cannot do it all in the different domains in Balochistan in the 2023-24 survey. These figures are per 10,000 children attending public mainstream schools in the province. So you can see that out of every 10,000 children in those schools, 9 were experiencing difficulty with seeing, 4 were experiencing difficulty with hearing, 7 were experiencing difficulty with mobility, and 15 with cognition. Just for perspective, if it was 1% of children, that would be 100 for every 10,000. So these figures are substantially below 1% of children. If we then look at the mixed data, which is a UNICEF survey of children in the province, it's a household survey, but I've restricted the data here to children who are attending school. You can see that the figures are much higher. So in the mixed data, for every 10,000 children attending school, 230 are experiencing difficulties with seeing, and 20 are experiencing difficulties with hearing. So this is consistent with quite a level of underreporting in the ASC data. If you could share the other provinces. So I won't go through each line in detail, but here I've added in the figures for the other provinces as well. So the top row in green is the ASC data, and then we've pulled in other comparable data sources for each province. And I think you can see clearly that in almost all cases, although not absolutely everything, the mixed data and a couple of other smaller surveys do find substantially higher prevalence of functional difficulty among children in public schools or in schools than was reported by the ASC data. Next slide, please. And this slide just gives a slightly different perspective on the data. What we've done here is we're not looking at the percentage of children anymore, but we're looking at the percentage of schools, and specifically what percentage of schools reported any children with functional difficulty in a particular domain. So you can see that in Balochistan, 8% of schools reported any child at the school having a functional difficulty, which means that 92% of schools reported that no child in the school had any kind of difficulty at all. And you can see those figures in that first column are quite low for each of the provinces, which is really consistent, I think, with many schools not fully engaging with that data. If you look at the column all the way on the right, that is the percentage of schools that reported any child with any level of difficulty. So the response options for the Washington group questions are no difficulty, some difficulty, a lot of difficulty, and cannot do it all. With all the other columns, we're just looking at a lot of difficulty or cannot do it all. With this last column, we've included some difficulty. And you can see there's a slightly higher proportion of schools reporting children who have some difficulty in at least one area. But for most of the provinces, with the exception of Punjab and Islamabad, there is still very, very low levels of schools reporting any child who even has some difficulty in any domain, again, which is quite suggestive of a level of underreporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Julia. So apparently, there are huge challenges here. However, how can we ensure, or what is needed to ensure that the provincial and federal systems can actually use this data for planning and budgeting?
Yeah, so that's the critical question. And really the first step has to be addressing some of the quality challenges and ensuring that the data that's collected is giving a more accurate reflection of the numbers of children in schools who are experiencing difficulties and who are likely to have additional support needs. Interestingly, several of our respondents, particularly at federal and provincial level, highlighted that one of the most important ways to achieve this is to ensure that the data that's being collected is being analyzed and reported, because it's only when the data is analyzed and reported and fed back to schools and communities and to stakeholders that challenges in the data become very evident. So one of the priorities in improving data quality is going to be to improve the capacity for analyzing and interrogating and interpreting this data and also reporting it. What we did find with the 2023-24 annual school census was that this was a real gap. In terms of the provincial ASC reports, only one province really was able to report the data in full, and many of the provincial stakeholders we spoke to reported that the data was quite complex and challenging to work with, and would have appreciated additional guidance and support in how to work with this data. So ensuring that guidance and capacity development takes place will be really critical.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. So coming to you, Mr. Ittifaq, so what does this experience tell us about Pakistan's readiness to embed disability inclusive data in the EMIS? I'll just change the slide as well. Please unmute yourself, Ittifaq. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so again, an important question, and thank you very much for asking that. I think my response to this question will, primarily be rooted into the findings of the studies that Julia has just shared, and we have seen that the data is quite underreported as compared to the other data sources. And I think the data is a double-edged kind of thing. If it is accurate, it can lead your way to success. But at the same time, if data is less accurate, it can mislead the planning and resource allocation and everything. So I think it is really important, and it can has implication for the education sector in Pakistan. But as per our discussions with the stakeholders, particularly with Pakistan Institute of Education, whenever something new is introduced as part of annual school census, it takes some time to get a level of maturity. And since we have seen that this time it was done in an enormous time pressure, so said that, I think if within iteration process, once we have achieved that level of accuracy and maturity, this data set has a lot of potential to inform educational policies in the country, particularly the provincial education policies and teachers training strategies and policies on inclusive education. Then education sector plans, particularly this is the time when all the provinces are in the process of developing new education sector plans. So it has a potential to inform these plans and make our plans and policies more kind of inclusive for children with disabilities. It also has a potential and implication for the resource allocation for the education sector. Once we have that accurate data set, I think that will be a crucial point for having more financial resources for inclusive education. And finally, I think since we are part of the global community, and we as a country, we have to report on progress on SDG 4, and if we will be able to get that level of accuracy, this will be an opportunity for Pakistan to report on SDG 4, and that's where I'll stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Ittifaq. So the last question is directed to both of you. Is there any final message that each of you would like to share with any policymakers and educators who are attending today, and otherwise as well for researchers? I'll just move towards the last slide as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll start, and then I'll hand over to Julia for the final word. I think this is really important. We have just seen in the findings that there was a limited kind of opportunity for cascading of training and guidance on data collection to the teachers. Teachers have a really important role. So empowerment of teachers in this whole process and picture is really important, not only in terms of collecting this data, but also then, having access to the data for the better utilization for inclusive education and education of children with disabilities and their inclusion in the, classrooms and schools and classroom activities. And also, there is a need to build the capacities of stakeholders as well, particularly people at the provincial level who are involved in the analysis of this data, because this is kind of a standard tool. So there are standard kind of protocols for analysis of Washington Group short set data. So capacity at that level is also needed to be expanded and enhanced for the proper analysis of this data. There is a need for more kind of systematic institutionalization of the Washington Group short set and disability data as part of annual school census, as well as overall as part of EMIS system. And we have also seen that there was an appetite and a request, suggestion for participants for the digitalization of annual school census, because in some of the provinces it is already there, but in other provinces it's totally manual kind of data collection. So that can also help us improving the quality of the annual school and particularly data on children with disabilities. I'll stop here and I'll hand over to Julia for any final word. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Itvak. I think my final message would really be to just emphasize that even though we've covered a range of challenges and limitations and areas for further work, which are obviously important, to remember that this achievement of the integration of these questions was a really significant achievement and absolutely colossal undertaking, and really a strong move in the right direction. And it certainly has started to raise a lot of awareness already about disability and about inclusion. And I think remembering how substantial of a step that already is can provide some encouragement and motivation in the ongoing iterative and quite gradual work to slowly improve and refine the quality of that data. I do want to mention one other thing just in terms of improving the quality of that data. I think it's important to remember that this data is data that fundamentally comes from teachers and from schools, and ensuring that teachers and schools can see benefit and value in collecting this data and considering issues of disability and inclusion is something that's also going to yield sustainable and ongoing benefits, both for data quality, but also for the quality of education that children with disabilities are receiving. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Julia and Mr. Tafaq. I think that's we've learned a lot today, and the study is an amazing study and so required. So we have a few comments from our audience. I think there's a question from Dr. Mosul. I think you have sort of partially answered this, but still I'll just read it out. Since government schools currently lack a formal mechanism to assess disabilities, how are you determining the number of students with disabilities? Is this estimation based solely on perception, or what measures are being taken to ensure accurate identification? So Dr. Julia or Mr. Tafaq, you may choose to respond to this.
Julia, would you go first?
Yeah, sure. I think it's actually an excellent question, and perhaps we didn't speak clearly enough about this. So this taps into the issue of the level of guidance and training reaching teachers and schools to some extent. It is really important to note that the Washington Group short set questions don't allow identification of disabilities. At the end of the day, a disability can only be identified through appropriate diagnostic measurements and would require clinical involvement. What the Washington group questions do is they ask individuals to look at a child and assess based on their knowledge of the child whether that child is experiencing functional difficulties. So is that child experiencing difficulty in seeing? Is that child experiencing difficulty in hearing? And how severe are those difficulties? Obviously, this is only ever going to be a subjective measure, but there are some indications that a child is having difficulty that can be used, and I think teachers become quite adept at assessing whether a child is struggling in a particular area or not. So it's imperfect information. It's not a count of disability. It is a count of children with functioning difficulties that may indicate a disability. It's generally used as a proxy for disability at a population level. It works quite well in this way. What it does indicate is that a child is likely to be needing additional support in the school or in the classroom. But again, this is why ensuring that teachers receive clear information about what they're being asked exactly to do and what kinds of indications they might be looking at is really important. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you so much for that, Dr. Julia. So we do have time. I'll just share Aruba Malik's comment from the audience. Pakistan faces a triple challenge in education: underfunding a large population of out-of-school children and the need to serve children with disabilities. What strategies can we implement to create inclusive educational spaces for students with disabilities? Moreover, we cannot depend completely on the policies and government. So what measures can we as individuals take to fix these issues? So yeah, it's a two-tiered question. So Mr. Fak, maybe you would want to take
Oh,
go
okay.
ahead.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. That's really a good question, I believe. Very rightly pointed out that, it's not only about, children with disabilities who are out of school and don't have the access. It's basically about also about the children who are already in school, but data shows us that, 2/3 of them are not learning on equitable basis. So that basically comes back to the question who those children are. But then, since we're talking about inclusive education, so it's not only about, catering the needs of children with disabilities. It's about everyone. So we used to say that inclusive education is all about a good teaching. It's about including every child in the classroom. So it needs a holistic kind of approach. It's not only about the data and access to education. It's also about, when we talk about inclusive education, we need to be careful to understand that it has kind of three at least component. So access is only one part of it. It's also about the participation of children in schools and improving their learning outcomes. So it needs a holistic approach. It's on one hand, it's basically providing and creating that access for the children, and then building the capacities of the teachers as well as the school infrastructure to facilitate these children to participate on equitable basis and then improving their learning outcomes. So the challenge is huge, we agree. And I also agree that it's not only to look at the government and policies to do these, steps. It's basically about, contributing in whatever capacity we can, and that's what we are doing through contributing for strengthening of data systems. And there are different organizations and players and stakeholders who are playing their roles in different in different areas and different components for strengthening of systems. I'm not sure if Julia has something to add into it.
No, I think you've covered it well.
Thank you so much. I think that's an amazing answer, Mr. Itfaq. Definitely a holistic approach, what we are looking at. A very interesting question from Dr. Aisha Sahar in the audience. Since the Washington group short set questions is about functional aspects, the derived analysis for intellectual and developmental disability is really important for the school to be able to focus. Slow learner, autism, and other children can be identified. Can we have a technical computation available, which I don't understand, maybe Aisha, you can also explain further, technical computation available to teachers based in Sightsaver data. Dr. Julia, does that resonate?
I'm happy to answer, but if Dr. Aisha wants to clarify at all.
Dr. Aisha, what exactly would you mean by technical computation? How to use the data for ID identification. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so let me speak a little bit to that. So the questions that have been included and that we've spoken about today are the Washington Group short set of questions, and usually there's 6 of those questions. However, for practical reasons, currently the annual school census is using just 4 of those questions, and they only cover 4 domains, so seeing, hearing, walking, and then remembering and concentrating. Obviously, remembering and concentrating has some alignment with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are 2 other domains which cover self-care and communication, and I think those 2 domains are also really relevant when it comes to intellectual and developmental disabilities. I think over the years there is some interest in potentially starting to include those 2 domains in addition to the current ones, which would start to generate more comprehensive data about children experiencing a broader range of challenges. Generally, there is another question set called Child Functioning Module, and there's in fact a version called Child Functioning Module Teacher version designed for teachers specifically to use, which covers a broader range of challenges that children may experience. Those are often recommended for use when you're working with populations of children, but it's quite a longer range of questions, I think 12 or 13. So practically integrating them in something like the annual school census just isn't very realistic. But I think it's definitely an area for further work in terms of thinking about how to strengthen levels of information and knowledge about children with often less visible disabilities, such as many intellectual or developmental challenges. Itfaq, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think you have covered it, but just to add that we acknowledge that, Washington Group short set is not the only tool to be used, and we also acknowledge that it underestimates the disability when it comes to children, and also that data standardization framework has used only 4 domains, but I think there is an appetite for including more domains in coming years, so that might help us improving the data quality in future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those responses, Mr. Itfaq and Dr. Julia. And we have come to the end of the webinar. We will be looking forward to, in fact, for the audience, the policy brief, the paper will be uploaded on the DARE-RC website in the coming months. So please keep an eye for them. The study is an amazing study, and this webinar is giving you only a snapshot of that study. Hopefully we will be continuing with this great work in Pakistan, and helping out those who are at the margins in the education sector. Thank you so much, Dr. Julia, once again for your time, and Tafaksa for sharing your knowledge with us. If there are no other questions from the audience, thank you for being an amazing audience, and we can then wind up this webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank
Take care.
you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.